As a women's health professional, you get it. You already know the value of menstrual cycle tracking. But I'm guessing that you're not entirely comfortable interpreting complex charts, weird mucus patterns, abnormal bleeding, or other similar and unusual situations. You're passionate about fertility awareness and you want to use it in your practice, but you're not sure where to start. And this is where FAMM comes in. Registration is now open for our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. The next class starts in a few short weeks. We're starting on the 26th of March, 2025. By the time you finish your FAMM certification, you'll have the skills to confidently teach fertility awareness to your clients, interpret all kinds of complex charting scenarios, and you'll have the step-by-step protocols you need to help your clients improve their hormone and menstrual cycle health. Registration is only open for a short time, so apply today at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. Transform your practice in 9 months. Join us in FAMM. Again, that's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 564. Today, I'm sharing another brand new episode in my FAMM Practitioner series. Today, I'm interviewing Rhoda, and she is sharing with us her experience jumping into fertility awareness charting. Rhoda's experience is a little bit unique because in her case, she had no prior charting experience prior to joining our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. And so she shares her experience of jumping right into it in the midst of a very busy life. She is postpartum, she has a little one, and she's working. And so she shares how she made it all work despite the obvious challenges in that situation. So before we jump in, I'm going to share a little bit about Rhoda. Whether you've been struggling to conceive or you're planning to get pregnant in the future, optimizing your fertility health can feel overwhelming. Rhoda Chi's root cause personalized support helps encourage and empower you to take control of your fertility and achieve your goals with research and data-backed information. Rhoda is a registered dietitian nutritionist, ELNA certified fertility and pregnancy dietitian, and a FAMM certified practitioner-in-training. Her passion and purpose is working with women in the areas of women's health, reproductive health, fertility, pregnancy, and exercise nutrition. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode with Rhoda. And I'm really excited to be here today with Rhoda. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Lisa. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a broken record. I really enjoy these episodes. After all these years of podcasting, I just love sharing genuine conversations where you get to share your experience and things like that. So I'd love to start just by asking you my favorite question, which is, how old were you when you had your first menstrual period? And maybe just take us through what your experience was like, whether it's related to menstruation or related to your experience on contraceptives, if you took those, and kind of like what led you to this place where you're at now, jumping into FAMM to, of course, add this aspect to your practice.
Okay, so to start off, I believe I got my first menstrual period when I was about 12. I was one of the last of my group of friends to get my period, but I remember I didn't hear about, your menstrual period or anything like that from my family or my parents. It was just something I knew happened at some point. And so when I got it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? What do I do? I had to kind of figure it out on my own. And then it didn't seem like anything that fazed me up until high school when I started participating in different sports. And that's when I noticed my cycles start to be irregular. And because I wasn't sexually active at that time, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, okay, I'm just going to, do what I need to do. I didn't look into it either, or didn't go to a doctor or tell my doctor about it. So I just went through my regular periods during high school. And then, afterwards, once I did start getting sexually active after high school, then I had a little bit of a scare. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I pregnant? So that's when I decided to get on a hormonal contraceptive, the pill. And it was for two reasons that I got on, obviously becoming sexually active, and then also with the irregular cycles, thinking like, okay, maybe this will help kill two birds with one stone kind of thing, I thought. And then was on the pill for about, I think it was 13 years when I counted. So I was on the pill for a long period of time. Once my now husband and I started talking about when we wanted to conceive, I decided, okay, maybe now I should start looking at getting off the pill. With the nutritional background that I had, I started looking at different research things and, what to eat and how to prepare my body, especially with the line of work that I was working in at that time. And so decided to get off the pill, got, labs done, try to improve my nutrition a little bit more than it already was, took some supplements. And then I was also trying to time my pregnancy because at the time I was doing an online master's program. So I specifically remember counting like, okay, this is when I'll end my program. And so I don't want to start conceiving until 9 months before this. Just so that I don't have the baby. If she comes a little earlier, if the baby comes a little early, then I'll give myself a little wiggle room. But I don't want to conceive until, at a certain point, not even really thinking about, whether or not I was going to have issues. But between that time frame of when I got off the pill to when we started to actively start trying, there were, so many other people that I had heard of that were having issues with getting pregnant. And with, the annual checkups that I had, I ended up finding out that I had some abnormal tissues in the cervix. And so had a surgery done. And so with the combination of those two, thinking, am I going to have issues when we actually start trying? I was really, really worried. And thankfully, when we actually did start trying, we didn't have any issues. We conceived, I think, within a month of actively trying. And it wasn't actually until after I had my baby where they asked the question of, do you want to go back on the pill? When I had been doing my research, trying to prepare for pregnancy, that's when I had learned actually about all the side effects that I didn't ask about or that I wasn't told when I got on the pill. And I thought, oh my gosh, what? This is crazy. Why was I on the pill for so long and I didn't know and I didn't ask and all this stuff? And so I knew that I didn't want to get back on the pill. But at the time, I actually didn't learn about the fertility awareness and tracking your cycle yet. And so I just told them no, that I was going to just abstain from sex or, be very careful. And so for several months, I think almost a year, my husband and I were just like, no, we're not going to do it today. We're not going to do it that way. Just very careful. And then I think, with my dietitian background and with me reading up on things from Lily Nichols, that's how I heard about you and your work. And then I started listening to your podcast and bought the audiobook, listened to it like I think within a weekend or something. Listen to the whole book. And that's when I just like went all in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to look this up and figure this out. And then I think that's when we had the call for me to join your program, because I figured, if I really want to use this as a form of birth control, because I don't want to get pregnant yet again for the second baby, then, I need to not only do it for myself, but maybe it's something that I could incorporate into the work that I wanted to do with women.
Well, that is incredible. I love how that one question just takes us down, anywhere from 10 to 20 years of your life in 5 minutes. There's so much to dig into, but thank you so much for sharing. And you did allude a little bit to your background. Do you want to share more specifically what your background is, what your practice is as well?
Sure. So my professional background is a registered dietitian. So for several years, I worked with my state WIC program, supporting women with their pregnancy and breastfeeding experiences. And so now I actually recently last summer, started my own private practice. It was originally intended to focus on nutrition during pregnancy and a little bit postpartum, but since now going through your work, I've incorporated the fertility awareness aspect to it. And so hope to incorporate that more into my offerings for my business.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to dig into some of your story. Like I said, there's so much there. And what I find fascinating, just even given the FAMM program that I've created, is how many women's health professionals have never heard of fertility awareness charting. And this is one of the points that I always tend to make these days, which is that anyone who falls into this rabbit hole. So if you're listening right now to the podcast, after you've been immersed in this field for a while, you kind of forget that there was a whole period of your life where you had never heard of any of this stuff. And the majority of the people in your life still to this day still don't really know any of this stuff. And even if they kind of know like, oh, Rhoda's kind of into this charting stuff, they don't really know what you know, That's kind of funny. They don't know what you know. That was not on purpose. But yeah, no, that's something that I find really interesting. And what you shared is a story that's similar to many that I've heard where, it's just this natural thing, natural in air quotes, that we go on the pill and you're on it for a while. Given that you were on it for 13 years, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what your experience was like on it, because I know on this podcast, I've highlighted many stories of women who had negative experiences, but obviously not all women necessarily have negative experiences. Or for many women, they may have had some symptoms, but they never made the link and they didn't really realize that until they came off. So I'd be really interested to hear that. But what you said really stood out to me because you came off, you had some challenges with regards to the cervical cells and the surgery that you had to have. You were able to conceive when you were ready to, but because of your nutritional background, you kind of had this sense of I should come off ahead. And then you spent all this time focusing on your nutrition during that time. So, we won't know the answer, but, I'm inclined to think that may have contributed to, you were able to conceive when you wanted to, but you had already gone through a lot of that, post-pill transition phase, as we've talked about in the program, and done the things that you really needed to do, right? But what you said was, I came off, I had my baby. And then of course, in the 6-week appointment, they're like, okay, so what are you going to do? And you're kind of like, I don't know. Like, I know I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to do that. But there was no plan because you hadn't heard of it. So that was like a really, really long question, but I'd just be interested to hear more about that because that's something that we want to change. We want more of our women's health professionals and more women in general to be very much aware of this option for those of us for whom the pill doesn't feel right anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I decided to get off the pill, like I said, I had no idea what I was gonna do except from like trying to be very careful when my husband and I, would, have intimacy. But yeah, I definitely knew that I didn't want to get back on the pill. And so when I would have conversations with, friends, if it came up about, when you're thinking of having your next baby, I'm like, oh, not for a while. I think I wanted to just share, like I don't mind sharing personal details with other people if they ask. So I felt like I wanted to always bring up details about like our intimacy and how we were being very careful, but didn't want to share too many details.
Yeah, I mean, what stood out to me was that you knew that you didn't want to go on the pill, but you didn't necessarily have a plan. But I mean, for what it's worth, you and your husband sorted it out. And then it was when you actually discovered that there's another alternative that you were able to like fully jump on that. I'd be curious to hear, how did you feel when you actually discovered that there was an alternative? And especially having been that you went through your master's program and all the other education that you took. And up to that point, you had not ever heard of this thing.
I think I was already about a year-ish postpartum, and that's when I learned about your work. And I heard that you could track your menstrual cycle and use that as a form of birth control. And I thought, what? How? Like what? You don't you don't have to go on the pill to not get pregnant if you're having intimacy like so. I was just so surprised and like learning all these things that you think like everyone knows, every woman knows, but obviously like you said in your work, like it's not something that we're taught in sex ed or even in high school or college. It's not common for people to know about. And so when I learned about it, I was just like, okay, I don't think I decided to look at how I could do it myself just because I had so many things going on with my daughter. I'm like, I need like one-on-one support with this because I don't think even if I try to like Google it, I don't think I could figure it out myself.
Well, and I love that so one of the questions that we do get from practitioners who are considering the program, because we get a variety of levels of experience with charting. We have, like in your case, no charting experience. And, but we also obviously have practitioners who have literally taken a fertility awareness certification from a different program. So we do have everywhere in between. So did you want to share what your experience was like? I don't, maybe I shouldn't like continue talking, but what I can say, Rhoda, is that I've been just so impressed with how you dove in. We know you have a little one and you've really been committed to the method. So it's been just such a joy from our end working with you, but I'd love to hear what your experience was like, because obviously we're thrown into it.
Hmm. Yeah, when I first started the program and started, learning all these things about how to track your BBT and how to check your mucus, which was like, wait, what? I don't think I ever noticed that before. But then when I started, I'm like, okay, yeah, the BBT thing I think took a little while, especially since my daughter still wakes through the night sometimes, and then in the mornings I would, put the thermometer in my mouth when she was nursing, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep, and I'm trying to lay there with the thermometer in my mouth, laying as still as I can. I'm like, okay, it's 10 minutes up yet? Can I push the button? And then with the tracking my mucus, yeah, it took a while for me to get used to that, the wiping before and the wiping after. And then I think, yeah, I printed my observational notation sheet and had one in each of my bathrooms, had a screenshot on my phone so that I could have it when I was out of the house or not at work with my printed papers. I think being, the type A person that I kind of am, I was like, okay, I have to kind of do things like almost perfectly. And then I had to get around that, my sleep isn't going to be perfect. My mucus and my checking isn't going to be perfect, but I have to just do what I can. And I think with my charting, you can kind of see in my chart where like I have so many different customized lines that I added on to track different things. But definitely went all in, and I'm loving what I'm learning. I can definitely see the changes with, the nights that I get better sleep, or when I control like my stressors a bit more. And since I've been consistently eating, liver on a weekly basis, even though I grew up eating liver, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to eat this for my fertility. It was just like, oh, okay, my parents cooked it, so I'm going to have it. So yeah, it's so fun to see all the different changes and all my the cycles that I've tracked thus far.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you bring up so many important points. I mean, certainly we always talk about this in class, but it's no surprise that this modality, this fertility awareness charting modality, attracts a lot of us fellow type A people. So one of the conversations that we often have with our practitioners, I mean, many of our practitioners are exactly in the same boat. We're doing this, we want it to be perfect. But one of the things we talk about a lot is that, the goal isn't to have a perfect chart. The goal is to move towards whatever it is that the goal that you have, like the broader goal that you had. So for you, Rhoda, obviously I shouldn't put words in your mouth, but one of the issues that you were having was that you didn't want to go back on the pill and you wanted to have an alternative type of birth control. So, I mean, ultimately, accurate charting is important to achieve that goal. But we do have specific considerations when you have a baby, when you're in postpartum, and so will your clients. And so for many of our practitioners, that can be a bit of a challenge, and that's what we work through in our practicum, which is that, where do you find that sweet spot between all of the information that you know and the quote correct way to do everything, but how do you meet your client where they're at and support them through whatever it is that they're going through so that they still get the benefit of charting without that need for it all to be, quote, perfect? Because I always say there's no such thing as a perfect chart because you're a human being. If you were a robot, we might have everything looking the same thing every single day. But as a person, you're going to have nights where you don't have as good sleep and things like that. And that actually brings us to that next level of the conversation, which is kind of like you said. You said, as if I have a better night of sleep, I notice that my cycle is different and my charts are different. And that's the point. The point isn't to be perfect, but the point is to start getting into that conversation, that understanding of how your chart shifts with different things that you're doing And that's really how we get into using the menstrual cycle as a vital sign. So, a question for you, out of that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of that. But as well, now that you actually have this information, and you mentioned that you've started to think about ways to bring this into your practice, I'd just be really interested to hear what has shifted for you now that you actually have this information, and even in terms of like your thoughts on what you can offer to your clients.
Well, the first part, I think with yeah, I'm kind of glad that I went through the, my own experience of like trying to be perfect with my tracking and charting, and knowing that, okay, if I don't get, enough sleep or as good of a sleep, or if something's, not right that day, then I just need to note it down. That way when I look back at my chart and see, why is this a little off, and then I know I can remember, because my memory is not that great either right now. I can go back and see like, okay, this could be the reason why it looks that way. And so yeah, it's great that I'm having the experience myself, because with some of the clients that I'm seeing, I'm having to encourage them, even though you might not sleep very well, or even though your days might be very hectic and crazy, you do what you can. And if anything, just note down, what happened. And then you have information, more data to understand what might have gone on if you see something funky in your chart. And then in terms of, yeah, my charts, it's just so crazy to see the different things, especially like I'm taking the methylfolate and the vitamin A, and seeing how my mucus has changed over the course of the few months with doing that. Yeah, just it's crazy just to see. And I think back on like, wow, I wish I kind of, I wish I heard of this sooner and started sooner. I think we had a conversation in one of my hot seats where we talked about how because I also checked my cervix, and like, it would have been cool to see what, what my cervix felt like before I had my baby.
Yeah. Attention women's health professionals. Early bird registration is officially open for FAMM, our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship. Classes start on March 26, 2025. FAMM is the perfect program for busy women's health professionals who want to offer fertility awareness charting support in their practice. FAMM cuts out all the fluff and only focuses on what you need to serve your clients better. Each module, homework assignment, and in-class training and chart review session are there for a reason. Where will you be 9 months from now? With a FAMM certification, you'll have a brand new skill set that will allow you to use the menstrual cycle as a diagnostic tool and vital sign in your practice. Your confidence in analyzing and interpreting menstrual cycle charts will be at a level you can't even imagine today. And you'll have a brand new offering in your business that will allow you to reach more clients. This knowledge is truly life-changing for both you and your clients. Transform your practice in 9 months. You won't regret it. Join us this year in FAMM. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive to apply today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. Yeah, that's something interesting as well, because when you get into the nitty gritty cervical details, if you have a vaginal birth and a baby comes out of your cervix, then you'll never have a pre-birth cervix, right? So the best we can do is talk about it in the general way, which is it typically feels like the end of your nose. So it typically feels like that. But after a baby has come through there, you typically have more of an indent. But I mean, absolutely, to your point, it's one of the things that can be hard. Because I remember when I first started this podcast, and I would get these emails from women in their 40s who would say, my goodness, I'm just discovering this now. And I wish I would have known all this information in my 20s. I feel like I'm really missing out. And although there's nothing we can, there's nothing we can do about that. We can't go back. Mm-hmm. So I encourage anybody who's feeling that way. I remember, we've had clients of all ages take our various programs. We've had clients after menopause take our various programs. So the reason I mention that is because, no matter where you are in your reproductive years when you discover this information, there's still like a benefit and a blessing for wherever you are. And so perhaps it's that, if you discover it a little bit later, you can even have a greater appreciation for how important it is and relate to your clients in a different way. And I know for me, there's so much joy in sharing this information with younger clients. It's one of my favorite things when I'm able to have, early 20s, mid 20s ladies of that kind of age group in the class, because you just know what potential that this has to really affect the trajectory of their life in a positive way. But at the same time, you find women who discover this in their 40s and their mid 40s, and it still can have a profound impact on how they experience those premenopausal years, and also a profound impact on what they can impart on their daughters if they have girls, or their nieces, or any females in their life, really. It's fair game. So just trying to put some positivity on that, because it can be kind of hard, when you think about, oh, I missed out on all of this. But I don't know. I just imagine what you're going to do in your practice with all of this information, and the greater appreciation you have for it because of your experience of kind of getting to this roadblock of like, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, so one question I wanted to go back to, you did mention that you were on the pill for 13 years. So I would just like to hear about what your experience was, positive, negative, or neutral, for anyone who's listening who is curious about that.
When I first got on the pill, I'd say obviously I was like naive, and even though I was somewhat a young adult by then, I definitely didn't ask the right questions when I asked to get on the pill. I wasn't taking it at the same time every day. Sometimes I wasn't taking it every day. And so I think it wasn't until I think a few years in where I was like, okay, I really need to like set an alarm and put on my phone, do that. And so thankfully when I started, and when I was consistent on being on the pill, I didn't have any major, horrible symptoms, at least physically, that I could feel at the time or experience at that time. But once I got off the pill, and I don't know, it could have been other things, other factors in my life, but I noticed there were times when I'd feel down about things, experiences going on in my life, and the insomnia and other things. And now I'm like, okay, what was it, the pill, or was it this or that? So, like you said, like you never really know. Yeah, thankfully, I didn't have any major horrible side effects. I think except for the like cervical dysplasia type stuff. That one I definitely feel like the pill for sure. Yeah, thankfully, didn't have too bad experience with the pill. I just know that if I knew better, if I could go back and tell my speak to my back then self, like ask these questions, look it up, do some research. I think with the clients that I have, my ideal clients are, the clients who are trying to conceive or preparing to get pregnant. But if I could, I would want to speak to, the younger women, especially once they start their periods, and tell them that they have options. They don't need to go on the pill or go on hormonal contraceptives if they, want to avoid pregnancy, that there are other options that they can go to. And this is something that will not only help with that, but could, help with their overall health too, with finding out other things like, endometriosis or PCOS. And so, yeah, I think this is just something, that I want to share with everyone, but it's hard to, you kind of have to focus on like one group of people that you really want to hone into. So,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I just wanted to ask a clarifying question, because you mentioned something about insomnia and depression. And were you saying that you had experienced some of those things while you were on the pill, and you kind of aren't experiencing them now, and you were wondering if they were related, or did you mean that in a different way?
not, it's hard to say. Like I experienced them during the pill, but it was also like during college. And so it's kind of hard to say if it was one or the other or a combination. After I had my baby too, I don't know if it was like a little bit of postpartum depression or just like a little bit of that, or coming off the pill again. Yeah, hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's always hard in retrospect. The positive thing though is that in your case, it doesn't seem like you had any really significant side effects. And I do think it's important to highlight that as well, because everyone's experience on the pill is so varied. And like I said, I know on this show, we have definitely highlighted a lot of negative experiences. I mean, I think that that's important. I think it is important to put out the negative experiences as well as the positive, but the reason that I think it's important is because there are women like yourself who were basically fine. And I think there are times when women who had the experience that was fine feel like everyone also had the experience and it was fine. And so that's why I think it's important to put that out there, because it's really interesting how the same hormones can have different effects on different people. So yeah, no, I'm really glad that you did not have a negative experience on it. There's something else that I wanted to highlight with regards to your experience on birth control. I did want to mention, for anyone who's listening who isn't as familiar with what the abnormal cervical cell / cervical dysplasia pill connection could be, this is something that I talked about in the fifth vital sign and in Real Food for Fertility as well in the pill chapter. And it's just, the pill is associated with a variety of nutrient deficiencies. And I'm sure you had known that already as with your nutritional background. And one of those deficiencies is folate. And long-term use is associated with deficiency. It's interesting when you read the research literature because there's not necessarily a consensus. There's a lot of short-term studies that might look at a 3-month window that do not show a correlation. But I would argue that 3 months isn't necessarily representative of the average duration that a woman is using birth control. And in your case, you mentioned you used it for 13 years. So the longer-term studies, which are sometimes fewer and further between to find, they do find that that is much more pronounced, that association between the long-term use and the folate. And there does seem to be a very specific relationship between our cervical health and folate. Obviously, folate is important for a variety of things, particularly related to fetal development. But there is this connection to the cervix. And so from that statistical standpoint, that is why women who've used the pill for a long period of time seem to have a higher rate of cervical cancer, as well as a couple of other cancers, liver cancer and breast cancer. But anyways, I just wanted to point that out for anybody who is curious about that. So a couple of questions as we start wrapping up. I mean, I would love for you to share a little bit about what your experience was in FAMM and, what your experience was, especially coming from a nutrition background, what your experience was and how you think that you may be able to start moving your clients through some of this, some of our protocols and things.
Sure. I think even just before getting into the program, I know when we were having conversation about whether or not if it was the right time, just with me having my daughter and, trying to start my business, but also still working another full-time job and, doing all these things. And even though it felt like it wasn't the right time, it was the perfect time, especially me being postpartum and preparing again for my next pregnancy. It was the perfect time for me to learn how to track and chart my own cycles, and especially with being able to incorporate this now with my offering in my practice. Yeah, I think going through the program, if there's someone listening to this and they're like, oh, I think I want to do it, but now is not the right time. It's the right time. Take this as your sign. um, it, like everything in life, it's hard to choose when the right time is, but I think if it's about learning to track and chart your cycles, the right time to start is now if you're not already, because you'll learn and gain so much from it. And in terms of the program, I think being able to have the calls with you and the other ladies and listen to their experiences just makes me more aware of the different things that I've experienced that I maybe haven't thought of, or and experiences that other women have that I didn't experience myself, because you know we experience our menstrual cycles differently, and obviously our daily lives are different, and so there are so many things that we can learn from each other. And so the program and just being in the cohort with the other ladies and having all the previous lectures that you've recorded to just, I think, makes the information there and available when I need it. And I think, yeah, it's been, I mean, we're getting towards the last few months of the program, and it's crazy to think when I first started, I'm like, okay, this is going to take 9 months. Can I really do that in 9 months and make sure that I get everything done and stay on top of it? And it's been challenging to get all my assignments done. I listen to our recordings, and I jump on the calls and when I can, even if I'm trying to multitask to get my daughter like to daycare or whatnot. But yeah, it's been great. I'm glad I joined when I did, and I didn't use other excuses to not join.
I do remember having the conversation, and at the end of the day, I've come to this kind of philosophy because I mean, this is a stage of life for any like woman who's like over the age of 20. It's like this is a stage of life where we have a lot going on. We typically have a lot going on related to our careers or education or a combination of those things. We typically have family responsibilities, whether you have children of your own or you're planning to, or whether you just have other people in your family who have other things going on. We have a lot of responsibilities. And when things are important, we make the time for that. It's just, there's just no good time. If you think about the last 2 years of your life, like when would have been a good time? Like there's no good time. The good time is just, so I'm glad that you said that, because one of the things that we try to do is we encourage our practitioners to jump in, because when you feel that, when you kind of have that knowing that this is something I really want to do, this is really important to me, the time will just pass and years will go by and nothing will have changed because you didn't just jump in and do it. And so we have done everything we can to provide a program in a variety of formats, if you will. Like, so there's a variety of different options for how you want to consume the information. Of course, I've written my books, which are the textbook, Real Food for Fertility and the Fifth Vital Sign, the textbooks for the program. So we have written information. We record all of our calls. We also have a library of our calls, and we're quite flexible. And Rhoda, you definitely, like I said, we've been thrilled at your participation, everything, but absolutely, you were jumping in when you were driving, when you were doing your pickups and stuff like that. And that's one of the things where we aim to be as flexible as we can, because we understand that our practitioners are busy. And so anyways, I'm glad that you shared that, because that's definitely a question of like, when's the perfect time for this? Well, the perfect time is now, because if we don't do it now, stuff is going to just always come up and we'll just never get there. So now that you're on the other end of it though, after the 9 months, just based on what you've told us and shared with us today, like you're at a totally different level of understanding. You joined the program having not had any charting experience, and now we're in the last couple of months of the program. And by the time you leave the program, it's like a totally different world.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe share like if there were two takeaways, like your two biggest takeaways from, and I know you're not completely finished yet because we're still in the midst of the program. We still have a couple months to go, but what have been your two biggest takeaways so far?
I'd say my one big takeaway would be to just dive in any chance that you get, even if you like me, have a million things going on. Like I listen to the recordings in the shower, in the car, when I'm driving, when I don't have another call, listen to the books, read the books and the research. Yeah, just immerse yourself in the information whenever you can, because there's so much to learn. And I think you've said it in our calls, where even if you've listened to it once, listen to it again, because you might catch something that you didn't catch the first time. So yeah, I've listened to the recordings and on our sessions a few times over and over. And so that would be one thing, is just immerse yourself and get in there. And the second thing I would say is talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to other people about what you're doing, because if they hear about what you're doing, then maybe they can share the information with other people that might be interested in working with you or learning about this. And that could potentially help you if you're wanting to serve a client or need a practicum client. That could be one way of getting that. Yeah. So just share what you're doing would be the second.
All right. Well, I love those two. And so as we come to close, I'd love for you to share, I know you shared a little bit about what you do, but I'd love for you to share a little bit about your practice, where you are, for anyone who's listening who wants to get in touch with you. So I'd love to give you an opportunity to do that as well.
For sure. Thank you. So I am specifically mainly on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Fertile Maven. That's my business name as well. And so I focus on serving clients, again, like I mentioned previously, serving clients who are intending to get pregnant in the near future or have struggled to get pregnant. And so I worked with women to help improve their fertility. Again, not just focusing on nutrition, but now incorporating this fertility awareness aspect of it. And that's a major part that we focus on in the very beginning.
Amazing. Love it so much. Rhoda, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of our FAMM Practitioner series. It's been so nice to hear. One of the things I love about these episodes as well is that even though we've been together for many, many months, I get to hear your story again in your own words. And I always learn a few things along the way. So I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for this opportunity. This was so fun. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in our next calls.
Awesome. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/564. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Rhoda. It was so fun to have an opportunity to dig into her experience. And also a good reminder, I think one of the themes that has come up in our FAMM research series is that even with a wide array of women's health training, the fertility awareness piece is still largely missing. The number of times I've had conversations with women's health professionals who are highly skilled in their area of expertise, but really had no idea about their menstrual cycle. This is just common. And I would say that it's kind of irregardless of your training and background, because as women, it's the general reality that we are not educated about our bodies. So it doesn't matter if you're like a medical doctor or, a nutritionist, or totally not even in the field, like if you're a hairdresser. In neither situation are we fully properly educated in the area of fertility awareness, cycle charting, and of course, the greater implication of tracking the menstrual cycle as a vital sign and learning about this deep connection between our cycle health and our overall health. So I think it's a great reminder that, especially for women's health professionals who are in the field working with women, if this is not an area that you've specifically taken that additional effort to take a deep dive into, to the point that you can actually do an in-depth advanced cycle analysis with your clients, I would say that you're certainly missing out on an opportunity to be able to really support your clients in this way. Of course, if you are wanting to take that next step and increase your fertility awareness education and confidence in your client work, registration is currently open for our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. So if that is something that you're wanting to look into, you still have a little bit of time to join us in our next group that starts this March, if you're listening in real time, March of 2025. So we're really excited to see you there, fertilityfriday.com/FAMM, LIVE, fertilityfriday.com/FAMLive. And with that said, I hope you enjoy your weekend, whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting. And that's a wrap. If you're loving the Fertility Friday podcast, then I know you'll love our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. It's a 9-month immersive experience that will completely transform the way you work with clients, allowing you to not only teach fertility awareness, but to use the menstrual cycle as a vital sign and diagnostic tool in your women's health practice. Our next class starts on the 26th of March. So there's still time to reserve your spot. There's no other program like this offered anywhere. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMLive to apply now. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. Join us in FAMM. This is your year, and we can't wait to have you. Again, that's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE.